In this video, we're going to learn how to use the lathe modifier with splines. Alright, so the next element that we want to create is going to be these little cushion pieces that go between the brackets. The best way that I think to be able to create this would be to use a spline to create the profile, and then we'll use the lathe modifier to create the rest of the geometry. So to get started with this, let's go ahead and go to our modify panel, or excuse me, our create panel, and then go to shapes, splines, and then we're going to use a line. Now whenever we're using this line, I want to make sure that my initial type is set to corner, so that way I can just create linear lines. So I'm going to just simply left click points to create the profile of this piece, and I'm actually going to create it all the way through. So to get started with this, let's start right here at the top. And then I'm going to hold down Shift to constrain the edge so it's perfectly straight. And I'm going to go right out to here and then hold Shift still. And I'm going to go down to here and then go across here all the way through that piece. And then I'm going to start to stair step the design here. Okay. And you just have to be close. You don't have to be absolutely perfect on it. And I could go ahead and create it from here. I think that might be a good idea to do. And this one I'm going to go right to here. I'm not going to go all the way through. And then I'm going to hold Shift and go right to the middle of that. Now let's go ahead and right click, and we've created the profile of that shape. Now with this, there's one thing that we will need to do. We need to go to our modify panel and go to vertex mode, and I need to make sure that the vertices in the center are exactly set in their X direction. So with this one, I'm going to go ahead and type in 16 on that, and then this one will do the same thing. So I know that they are perfectly aligned in the X direction. Now all I have to do is go ahead and turn off vertex mode, go to the modifier list, and type in lathe, L-A-T-E-H-E. So L-A-T-H-E, and there's lathe. And you'll notice that it creates a very odd shape. That's not what we were looking for at all. And there's a little bit of setup that needs to go along with this. So in the parameters, we have our degrees. So how much is this going to spin around or lathe to create our shape? We want it to go 360 degrees, so we're going to leave it just as it is. I also want to make sure that I weld the core. So those vertices that were in the middle, I want to make sure that they're welded nice and neat, and we don't have any problems with that. Let's take a look at the direction in which it's lathing. It looks to be correct, it's just done it on the wrong side. So here's where the alignment parameters come in handy. Let's go ahead and use minimum, and that's going to use the left side of the geometry to lathe around, and this looks correct. Now looking at it, I can see that it looks very dark, and so let's go to our perspective view. Just kind of check out what's going on with this. The issue that's happening is that this object, the polygons are flipped inside out. So here is that checkbox that we can correct that. So now everything has been flipped around properly. Everything looks good. Now there is these vertices here in the middle, and it creates a bunch of triangles, and that's fine. We don't have to worry about that too much. Like I said, this particular object isn't going to deform, so triangles are okay. We could optimize it a little bit and bring it down. So in order to optimize it, I'm going to take these segments down to 8. Remember those 8-sided cylinders that we created and how easy they were to optimize? It's pretty much the reason why I'm going to do this. So now that we have this in place, let's go ahead and convert it down to an editable poly object. Now we could right click and convert it, or what we could do is add an edit poly modifier to this, and it will give us the exact same behavior that we had with the editable poly object. Now I do want to center up the pivot point on this object, and so I can go to the hierarchy panel, effect pivot only, and then center to object, and it's going to center it on the editable poly object because that's what we have selected. So here, let's go ahead and push this into position, and it's going to pop right in there in this bracket. What I would do is go ahead and go to the top view, hit F3, and then we could come in and try to use, well, we don't have any vertices to snap to on that. So what we can do is just get as close as we can. We don't have to be perfect on it, just get close. And what I'm looking at are these edges right here. Try to get those lined up. And then same thing here at the very top. So that should get you really close. And then if you want to get those around the rest of this bracket, you could go ahead and create or affect the pivot again and zero it out. Okay, I'm not going to change the Z direction on that. And then let's just grab our rotation tool, and in our bottom view, let's hit B, hold down Shift, rotate that 90 degrees, and then we'll do 3 copies of that, make sure it's an instance, and hit OK. So now we have these 3 objects that we can now start modifying and changing. Now let me select one of them. It doesn't really matter which one. It could be the original. Let's go to Edge mode, and let's select this edge, and this one. So these 4. And what I want to do is I want to remove those edges just to optimize this a little bit. So to do this, I'm going to hit Control Backspace, and that will remove the edges and any vertices that are attached to that. In this case, there weren't any extra vertices, so that's fine. Let's do the same thing on the bottom. Let's select the ones that are off at an angle and hit Control Backspace. There we go. And then I can come in, and I see that this particular piece has these little clipped looking things on them. So what I could do is actually extrude those down. And actually it looks like I need to maybe add a segment in this. So let's go to Edge mode first. And no, we're good. Let's go to Polygon mode. And I'm going to select just 4 of these polygons. Let's select this one, and this one. So we'll just do these 4. And then what we'll do is we will go ahead and inset those. And we'll do something like 0.25. And then I'm going to extrude those. And we'll extrude them in a positive direction there. And let's do this. Let's extrude them maybe 1. And then I want to kind of bring them in a little bit closer to the center here, kind of like it's grabbing around this piece right here. So what I can do is grab my scale tool, and let's switch this to view. And then I want to use the selection center, and that will center up my pivot point on that. And then I can actually scale them in toward one another, and they will scale a little bit on the size, but that's okay. I'm not worried about that. Now, if I wanted to scale these polygons individually, I could switch this over to local, and watch what happens here. I can actually scale it in just like that, and it will scale the other ones as well. So that's a really neat trick. So then what we'll do is we'll extrude it one more time, and then I'll scale those even a little bit further, and then I'm going to switch this back to view, still using that selection center, and then I'm going to scale them out just to kind of push them out and give them this little look here. And then whenever that's smoothed out, that will give us that look. And we can always modify this as we go. Now, it's really important to remember that the changes that we've just made are contained within the Edit Poly modifier. So if I were to turn it off, you'll notice that all of those changes that we just made are all gone, including the edges that we took out. This is called non-destructive modeling in 3ds Max. This allows us to make changes, and we've basically saved a state of the model through the modifiers themselves. And so if I decided that I wanted to maybe put these clip elements on a separate Edit Poly modifier, I could go ahead and add another one to this, and then anything that was changed or added in this one will only be contained in this modifier, which makes it really, really helpful to do iterative design. I'm going to right click on it to delete it because I don't necessarily need that. So now that we have those pieces, we can go ahead and move on into our next lesson.